Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am here with you today, and I got a special guest. I am here with Tech Sergeant Scott Lauderbaugh, who's with me today. We're going to have a pretty good conversation. We're going to tell a little bit about his experience. Now, Scott's a pretty interesting person. So he's got a diverse military background. He's going to kind of talk to us today about that. But I say that because he is currently in the Air Force Reserves, but that's not where he started. He's got active duty service in the Navy. He was also in the Army Reserves. He was later in the Air National Guard, and then most recently, and now, is in the Air Force Reserves. So he's seen a lot when it's come to military service. He's been in various branches. So he's an interesting person for us to talk about today. But also, he's got a pretty interesting story that he's going to talk about in terms of his courageous stance against the unlawful vax mandate. So we're certainly going to talk about that today as well. So first things first, we're going to say hey to Scott, and we're going to allow him to introduce himself. So Scott, thanks for being on here with me today. I appreciate it.
Hi, Brad. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I appreciate everything. As far as things go, these are my views and not the views of the DoD or the United States Air Force Reserves as I tell my story. But before I do that, I'd like to do a couple scriptures that have helped me through this task of fighting the vaccine mandates. And the first one comes from the book of Joshua, verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And then the second one is going to be Isaiah 40, verse 31. They who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. Amen. So getting into my military career, I first started out in the United States Navy back in 1993. It was October 3rd, 1993. I enlisted. Kind of a backstory real quick. As an adolescent or a young adult, young man, my father, who served in Vietnam, and before him, my grandfather served in the Korean War. So we have kind of an extensive military family. My brother also served in the Air Force active duty. I'm the oldest of four. And so getting back to it, after I graduated high school, my father basically, called me in and he's like, hey, what do you want to do, with your rest of your life? Because, you got to move out and things of that nature. I said, I kind of don't really know. And he goes, well, I kind of got 5 things for you to select through. And he said, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. So the good thing about all that is that I was in ROTC at Passaic High School that I graduated from, and they had an ROTC program. NJROTC is what they called it back then. So I was in that for 4 years of high school, from freshman year all the way to senior year. And because of that, I was able to, when I enlisted, it was a late entry program. It was August of 93. So because of that, I was able to come out of basic training once I graduated from basic training as an E3 instead of just an E1 or an E2. So that was really significant for me in my military career. So I kind of had a lot of a heads up as far as the background of it. Now, the ROTC was ran by Navy and Coast Guard. So in high school, which was really cool, we were able, they called them field trips, but they were actually programs that we had put in for to go and get a taste of the military, or a taste of what boot camp was really like. So Coast Guard boot camp, Navy boot camp, I got to go to both of those sophomore year, junior, and senior year. So I already had an idea what I was getting into and things of that nature. So I signed up and I went to Great Lakes, Illinois, which was, they used to call it Great Mistakes. But other than that, I mean, it was a great time there. When you're in the military, they start naming bases of different things and stuff of that nature. But I learned a lot. I learned so much, marching and things like that, integrity, love of country. Not that I didn't already from naval science or my upbringing, but it kind of infused it. They definitely On Sundays, that was like your time to worship. So we were really allowed to go to church a lot on Sundays, which was great because we got to get away from the monotony of training, so to speak, and then have a spiritual background to things. So they pushed that a lot while I was in. Other than that, after I got through all of that part of the mess training, which is basically your galley duty and things like that. Background of my family is my mother's side is Italian, so my grandparents would cook all the time on Sundays. We'd have Sunday dinners, fresh sauce and pastas, lasagnas, things of that nature. Everything in Italian, cuisine. And I kind of found my niche at that point. So when I was finished, Senior Chief Gosha, I remember his name because he wrote me a recommendation letter. And this was just when I was graduating basic training. And I got to my first duty station was in Philadelphia Naval Shipyard on the USS John F. Kennedy, aircraft carrier CV-67. I think it was the last oil burner. Everything after that was all nuclear generated power. So went there, instead of going to the S2 division, which was all the enlisted galley, they put me right to S5 division because of that recommendation letter. So I was in the wardroom cooking for officers. And that was a great experience as well. And then there came a point, I would say 2 years into my Navy background or my Navy career, the Captain Hoeing had come down, and I was baking cinnamon rolls. It was late at night, and he came in and he goes, "Mind if I, sit down here?" And he got a cup of coffee, pulled up a cooler, sat down, and he goes, "What do you want to do, with your career?" And I said, "Well, I want to be a chef." And at the time, they were allowing college courses on board the ship. So St. Augustine Culinary was brought on, and I was able to attend that and get college courses and background and get my my associate's degree. The first part of it, when I was honorably discharged from the Navy after my career, my first job, I took a break in service, moved back to Jersey. I worked at a 4-star, 4-diamond restaurant called The Manor. It's in West Orange, New Jersey. It was big time at that point. And this is me going into a civilian world, not thinking that I had the credentials for it, but I was hired there and everything went from that point on. Moved out to Pittsburgh, and then just before 9/11, I joined the Army Reserves, 630 Transportation Unit in Washington, PA. And I got the opportunity to not only cook, but drive M915s, M916s, which are tractor trailers. And I got first class hands-on lesson of that with Sergeant Imes. And he would we were doing hurricane relief at the time and going down for our 2 weeks. And we would drive down from Myrtle Beach all the way down to Somerville, South Carolina. And I learned how to do that and smoked out the tires and stalled the truck out a couple times all the way down there. And just had a huge crash course about what it was to go from gear 1 to 16 and all the numbers in between. So with a clutch. So once I got that down pat on the way back, it was beautiful because I got to, I guess, have a lot of camaraderie with the other soldiers on the CB and listening to the music and just having a good time on the way back. After that, I took another break in service to finish up. I went to Pennsylvania Culinary, downtown Pittsburgh. At the time, it was no longer, but back then I did, and finished up my culinary career. And a friend of mine who I knew had told me about the 171st Air National Guard, which is in Pittsburgh. And I wanted to go back in and finish up. At the time, I also had a wife and 3 children. So I wanted to go back in and finish out my military career. There I served 12 years. So at the time, right then, I was at 3 honorable discharges. And then I finished up at the 911th Air Force Base. Well, wanted to finish up at the 911th Air Force Base. I signed on my last 3-year contract there. And everything was going great up until 2020. So, and then everything, from 2020 and going into 2021, I should say, then the brakes hit. And here we are with the situation at hand. So.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks for giving us that background. So that's interesting. So when we look at where we are now, I mean, today's October 1st, 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that you've been in various service branches, everything from active duty to the Guard to the Reserves, Navy, Army, Air Force, but also, I think you said October 3rd, 1993. That's the date that you
That's
first.
the date I initially enlisted in the Navy.
So, so we're at 30 years. Like, yeah, you've had a break in service, but you put on the uniform 30 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So, incredible. Just, an incredible amount of service, a variety. You clearly seen a lot. Everything from what you were doing in the active duty Navy to then what you were doing in other branches of service, et cetera. But also, October the 3rd, 1993. That's, this was, that's also a very, very significant time in our military history because as you were entering the service, we would have been dealing with the whole, the Mogadishu, Somalia, what has come to be known as the kind of the whole Black Hawk Down incident. So that was kind of going on then too. Okay, good. So you came from a military family.
Yes, sir.
Your father very much urged you to pick a branch of service and go, pursue some time in the military. It seems like that was important to him. You did that, and then so when you decided to enlist in the Navy, now what was your original plan? Did you say, hey, I'm going to do this forever, or was it more, I'm going to do this for a couple of years and I'm going to go do something else? What was kind of your initial thought when you initially enlisted, for how long you thought you would be in the military?
Well, at the time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and I don't know if it's just me or just my situation, or if it's any other young adult that's going through this. What are you going to do with the rest of your life and career? At that time, it was just high school and ROTC, and a job, but it wasn't a career thing. So I wanted to do something, and the only place that I knew I could find it in at that point in time was the military, because your ASVAB scores, and they actually give you hands-on training and things based off of your jobs and what you select. And it was right there for me. And I love my country, and I wanted to serve like my dad did. So that was important to me.
So when your dad had this conversation with you, like, hey, was this, your dad's encouraging you to join the military, but this is something you kind of wanted to do as well. It's not like you were being forced against your will.
No, they were just options, that he had given me, but he actually explained to me, hey, listen, well, back then, it's like, three squares, you know what I mean? And that's like his thing about how it was, because that's how it was for him in Vietnam or in his time when he was in the military.
Right.
So I think that not just the war itself, I think it was just serving your country, you know what I mean? And also they provided the training for the jobs that you potentially wanted to do, whether it be electrician, plumber, being a mail carrier, or a chef, or So yeah. For him, he was in the Seabees. So you really don't know. Like for me, I wasn't told the stories of how my father grew up or what his interests were until I graduated high school and I was moving into that next part of my life. So he explained to me that he was in the Seabees during Vietnam, and this is what he wanted to do as a plumber, and that's what he did. And he actually had his own business as a master plumber for a long time. And so I saw that and I figured, well, I can have my own business or, exceed and do things and work in a good area and have a great career as a chef. And after that, I kind of did so with the manor. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you mentioned, and obviously we'll talk about this, but this is important. So you mentioned that moving into where you are currently with the Air Force Reserves, that you previously had 3 honorable discharges, right?
Correct.
All right. So just to kind of, go through this again very quickly and paint the picture for everybody who's listening. So you had how many years of active duty service in the Navy was it initially?
6 years active.
Okay. So 6 years active, and then you're honorably discharged from the Navy, right?
Correct.
And then you actually go pursue work in a restaurant as a chef. And then you decide that you are going to enter into the Army Reserves. Is that correct?
Yeah, I moved out to Pittsburgh because my parents had moved out here. My dad moved his plumbing business out here. There was nobody. There were family members out in Jersey, North Jersey, where I was from at the time, but my family had moved out here. And my mother had told me, she's like, hey, there's restaurants out here, you know, college and everything. And I wanted to finish up. So I moved out to Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
I was originally born out here. So it's kind of like, it was actually like I was a homecoming for me.
Okay. And so how long again were you in the Army Reserves?
2 years.
Okay. So then you're discharged from the Army Reserves.
Correct.
And then you enter the Air National Guard.
Correct. 12 years.
12 years in the Air National Guard. And then you were honorably discharged once again from the Air National Guard.
Yes.
Okay. So then you you join the Air Force Reserve, which is where you are currently. Obviously, we're going to talk about this, but you've been active duty Navy. You've served in the Army Reserves and in the Air National Guard. You've been honorably discharged from each. So you've, served your time faithfully on multiple occasions and in multiple branches of service. And then you enter the Air Force Reserves.
Correct.
And you said everything was going smoothly in your career as it always had.
Yep.
And now we're in spring of 2020, right? So kind of paint the picture for us as to how things are looking in that spring of 2020.
Well, it was kind of crazy because at the time on the base prior to that, everything was just as it would normally be. At the time, I'm just going to drills, which is 1 weekend a month, 2 weekends a year. It's a part-time job. For me, it's not my full-time job. But I want to finish out honorably and retire and things like that. So everything is kind of just going to normal as it would until the country was shut down and the vaccine mandates were implemented or potentially implemented at that time, were coming out. But nothing really happened until major as far as on my base. No masks, no tests were pushed by the wing commander whatsoever up until August of 2021, when the initial vaccine mandate paperwork had come out from the DoD.
Okay. So that's pretty interesting to me because so you're saying when everyone kind of starts talking about, this new word enters everyone's vocabulary, COVID, that nobody's ever heard about before, right?
Yep.
So so from the spring of 2020, when everyone kind of starts hearing about this in the United States, until late summer or fall of 2021, so for a year and a half, on your base where you were working, nobody was wearing a mask, nobody was forcing testing or anything like that.
Well, there were certain people that had masks on, certain airmen, but I think it was because of the media part of it that they had the mask. I wasn't pushed on the base. I think it was, from my standpoint and what I saw and what I experienced, you had a choice.
People were voluntarily putting on a mask on.
Basically, because of the fear.
Yeah, of course.
Of that from the media and things like that. They weren't ordered to. The masks were there, like how they are now. You know what I mean? They're still out there. They were there if you chose to wear it.
Okay. So to your knowledge, there were no mask mandates on your base or mandatory testing throughout 20 and then through the first, spring and summer, et cetera, of 2021. Okay. That's actually pretty incredible because on a lot of DoD installations, there were, mask mandates, and depending on the circumstances, there might have even been mandatory testing at a time. So that's okay. That's pretty interesting because that means compared to some individuals where you were and where you were working, it was less strict with some of this stuff, than other places. All right. So now it's August of 2021. We all know the story that the FDA supposedly approves Pfizer shot. Of course, that's not the true story, but whatever. And then the very next day, August 24th, DoD implements the mandate. So what happens from kind of the end of August of 2021 moving forward? How does your life change, at least in terms of your
it kind of changes on the base wide, really. I felt that at the time that we were either the guinea pig, so to speak, of what was happening, because even a lot of people that are there now, after speaking with them after all this time, they even feel that way as well. So they didn't know if they were like the test subject of how this was going to lay out, if we were the first ones or not. We don't know. However, we had a meeting, or wing commander call, if that's what you want to call it, at the time. And they had basically told us that, okay, this drill, we're going to have a sit down and talk about that we're going to be initiating the COVID vaccines to everyone, and everybody's going to get it. So at that point, I would say it was drill, coming up on drill, which was of all dates, 9/11 of 2021 and 9/12 of 2021. That was the drill weekend. And I already told my airmen that I was planning to stand up or at least question it, because we already knew it was coming, that it was already put out in an email and everything. So at that point, I'm already preparing in my mind of all the research that I had already seen previously up to this point. And I basically type up a letter or document that I put together that shows information, shows the links, the alternatives, so we can look at both sides of the coin before, injecting people with what we know now is a bioweapon.
So, okay. So August 24th, the mandate is implemented.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have drill on September 11th, September
12th,
2021. So about 2.5 weeks after the mandate goes into effect.
Yep.
Now, throughout 2021, long before the mandate, but when people just in the general public are starting to talk about this COVID vaccine, and people are starting to take it, and people are, putting photos of themselves taking a shot, and then they make it their profile picture on,
Facebook and stuff,
whatever. So, but before this is even mandated in the military, are you dead set against it? I mean, was there ever a time in which you were considering taking it, or had you started to do research pretty early, long before it ever became mandatory, and you'd kind of made the decision that, like, hey, this is not something I want to put in my body?
I did the research as it was coming out, as things were playing through. On our base, it wasn't right away. You know what I mean? They kind of like let it lull for a little bit. I think that, and I don't know this for a fact, it's just an assumption of it because of what I saw. They didn't push it right away. They waited until the letter was actually mandated, and then they did it. You know what I mean? Now, during this time frame, I'm pretty sure that other people are already getting it. Look, I got other shots. This is their mentality. I'm going to go get it just like everything else. I don't think that military members at the time knew what was going on more so than they do now, because it was silenced by the media or swept under the rug, and the information was not out there about what this product can actually do to you. What are the side effects? What does it do to your body on the inside? So I think that people thought that it was just like a normal flu shot, normal whatever shot that we typically get anyways, because we have to be inoculated or, for health reasons that they state and things like that. So I think the mentality of the airmen on my base was that it was just a general thing, just another shot, you know what I mean? And people started to go get it.
So from what you saw, your peers, a lot of people were not necessarily questioning this. They thought this was just another run-of-the-mill vaccine like the others that they had taken.
Yep.
So some of them went and got it even before it was mandated by the military. Okay. All right. So let's circle back to then, of all dates you said, right? September 11th, September 12th. So this is about 2.5 weeks after the mandate has gone into effect by the Secretary of Defense.
Right.
You're at drill, and you said there was a wing commander call. So tell us what a wing commander call is, and explain kind of, for those who may not be aware, what a wing commander is, what rank that would be, for the officer, et cetera.
It's a lieutenant colonel, basically, of FSS. So FSS is Force Support Squadron in the Air Force. But there's different departments. So there's a head of each department, basically. And there's a meeting that we have during drill. It's called a stand-up. So stand-up is they basically disseminate information of what they're going to do for that week and for next drill, just to give everybody a heads up of what's going on. That's basically what stand-up is, wing commander calls, so to speak.
Okay. And so this is going to be, this stand-up, you say, is going to be chaired by the commander, who's a lieutenant colonel.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And the topic for this specific wing commander call is going to be not just these shots, but the fact that it now is mandatory, and so everyone's got to go get these shots.
Correct. So basically, you had to sign a letter stating that you understand the order that's been given to you and follow it. At the beginning part of it, other people had signed it already and things like that. But I think people started to understand what was really going on. So you had a little bit of people just waiting it out, so to speak, in the hopes that it would just go away. For me, I refused to sign the first initial letter at the time. So at that point, it was, what do I do? And how do I completely say no to this, or is there another option for me? And at the time, there was other people that I was engaged with outside of the base, and they kind of had meetings, and I'm talking about American citizens were already going through the process, healthcare workers, people that were working in just their regular jobs that they've been working for years, and they're being mandated now. So now people are coming together to try to find out how to combat it, or how to, you know what I'm saying? And the coming together of it was just amazing. It was just knowing people. And then they were telling me they had a meeting at Mission Barbecue, which is in Robinson, PA, which is not far from our base. So on Saturday, I went out there. I think it was Friday to prep. I went out there and I had a meeting with them, and there was a constitutional teacher who was there. So the initial order came out, and I showed it to her. I said, this is what they're telling us we have to sign. And she had given me an example of that. What she does as a constitutional teacher for her children is she puts signs under duress and a UCC code, basically I believe it's 308, and uses that. And that's her signature. So I said, well, what is that? And then she showed me, she said, all you got to do is sign it under duress. And I can show you the document if you'd like. I'll do a quick screen share of it. So this is basically the document that they gave us as far as a religious accommodation exemption. But if you scroll down, you'll see that I signed it under duress and UCC it's 308 instead of 380.
Okay.
And what that basically states is, I could pull up, I Googled everything, and what under duress shows. And it states threats, violence, constraints, or other actions brought to bear on someone to do something against their will or better judgment. Well, at that point, that's how I signed it and submitted everything to my command. And I think that their eyes went from this to blowing out of their head, because I think that they saw what under duress was, but I don't think they initially knew until a day later. And then that's when this comes.
Yeah. And okay, so tell us again the UCC code 1308. I know you marked 380 on the document, but you said what you actually meant with
what 308 is reversed. But basically it seeks to provide the ability to declare inadvertent contractual consequences null and void. In short, the code establishes that when agreeing to certain performances or contract terms, in such terms result in a loss of rights to which one party is unaware, performance cannot be forced. So basically, this falls under the Bill of Rights.
What does UCC stand for again?
It is called, I believe, I had it pulled up. I think it's on the other one.
Yeah, it's Uniform Commercial Code. It's right there.
Uniform Commercial Code, UCC.
Yep, Uniform Commercial Code.
Yep.
So in a conversation with this constitutionally experienced person, I think you refer to this individual as a constitutional teacher.
Correct.
Person instructed you that, hey, this document that they're requiring you to sign, you don't necessarily just have to sign it, and by doing so, give away all your rights. You've got some options here you might not be aware of, and you can sign it and you can reference UCC code 1308, and then also sign, but stipulate that you are signing under duress. So this is the legal counsel, because this person is not your lawyer per se, but this is a person who is saying, there are ways in which you can still sign this document, but at the same time preserve your own rights or protect your own rights by referencing this specific code and then stipulating on the document with your signature that, hey, I'm signing, but I need you, the party who is requiring me to sign, I need you to know that I am telling you that I am signing this under duress. There's some sort of duress you're placing me under as I sign this.
You're forcing me to do it against my will, against my better judgment. No, I know that it's wrong. I know that it's what it is now that we know what it is, right? We know it's bad. And I kind of knew that in the beginning. And then that's where I come up and we have the stand up, and Lieutenant Colonel, she says, after she's done telling everyone that we have to get the vaccine mandates, they're going to set everything up. We're going to go to the hangar and they're going to put everybody in the categories, and everybody's going to get the shot. This is mandated. And she goes, does anyone have any comments, questions, or concerns? And they always say that at the end. So at the time, I already started writing up this next document that I'm going to share with you.
Okay.
And explain it. So it pulls up, which is good. I'm going to share it. Here we go. So I already have the paperwork together. I already have this first page set up. And this, again, is back on 9/11 of 2021. So I entitled it Infiltration from Within. All of these.
That you put together. I
put this together.
Okay.
I'm doing all the research and I'm putting the links on here for my leadership. So basically I stand up and I say, ma'am, I'm requesting a timeout. And what a timeout means in the military basically is like if you're doing a training, as an example, if you're doing a training exercise, and in my case, if an airman gets hurt or someone gets injured, whatever, you can call for a timeout and say, hey, we got to stop this. So basically what I was doing is calling for a timeout as a non-commissioned officer, as an NCO, to look after my airmen, because I knew that what was coming down the pike was not good for any of us. And as an NCO, in my oath to the Constitution, it is also my duty as a tech sergeant and the creed of an NCO to look after your airmen and protect your airmen or your military brothers and sisters. So I took all of that together, and like I was saying, for me, it was a whole bunch of different reasons. My religious beliefs, it was the way I was raised and my morals, and it was also my duties as a non-commissioned officer and the time that I've been in the military, and my duties again as a tech sergeant to my airmen. So I basically do all these links and I set everything up and I hand them out to everybody, Lieutenant Colonel, the Major, Senior Master Sergeant, First Shirt. And I was the only one at the time that stood up, that I saw anyways. I think at the first I was just like, wow, I turned around and I looked and, I was the only one. So other than that, basically, we go into 9/11/2021, and I basically tell the story. I write everything down because what I'm doing now is I'm building the story to submit the paperwork into JAG for not only an EEOC, but there's another thing that you could submit into. I just forget what it is. I have it off the top of my head, but you can go up the next chain of command and submit it. So I'm building the story right here into this to explain what has happened and what has transpired. So the next step of that was they had everyone up in the hangar bay and they had everyone blocked off. So they had Pfizer or Moderna. They had two lines. So they're basically segregating everyone. And then off to this side here, they had medical exemptions. And then on this side of the circle of it, they had religious accommodations. So now they're splitting everybody up. So they already know who's getting vaccinated. They already know who has medical conditions or exemptions, and they also know who's going to be submitting religious accommodations.
So when you say they're splitting people into these groups, right? When you say Pfizer and Moderna, you're talking about people who had already received those specific shots?
No, who are going to be receiving them.
Okay. So this is on the day that people are being divided up to go and receive shots.
Correct.
And so some people, they were So how were they figuring out who was going to receive the Pfizer shot and who was going to receive the Moderna shot?
Well, they had two lines, and then they had, I guess, when they went in through there, they had a login sign of what side they were on. So I know that there was two tables that were there. So when they came up, they'd sign for if it was Pfizer, and then if they were on the right side, they signed for Moderna.
Okay. And so what you're doing is, so you've obviously done a lot of research. You're taking links from the research you conducted, you're putting them into this document you created, and you're handing this document out, but you're also giving it to your chain of command, right?
Correct.
But then another reason that you're doing this is because you are logging what's going on and the date that certain things are being discussed at these wing commander calls, etc. And you're informing your chain of command, hey, listen, I'm logging what's going on, and oh, by the way, I have a duty as an NCO to say, maybe we're rushing into this and maybe we need to stop, maybe we need to halt, maybe we need a timeout to evaluate what's going on before we continue to rush into this. Correct. That's kind of what your thought process is and what you're informing your chain of command of. And you're also submitting this document to them, right?
Also submitting the document to them.
Okay.
And it goes into, and the last page basically goes into my beliefs and the reason why all three of the pages, everything, that information that's on there is all three reasons why I did what I did.
Okay.
Initially.
And I see here, on this third page, we use timeout to stop or pause military training or scenarios when or if members get hurt during those times.
Correct.
Military members are being hurt on a physical level and mental level, and so are their families. So you're already calling attention to the fact that, hey, if we're in a training scenario and somebody gets injured, sometimes you got to call timeout. You got to stop the training scenario because you got an injury you got to deal with, right?
That's right.
And so what you're saying is, hey, we're already suffering physical and mental injuries. You're calling attention to, physical injuries, mental injuries. Families are suffering because of what's happening to their service members. Right. So you're calling attention to this as early as the weekend of September 11th, September 12th of 2021. So 2.5 weeks after this mandate has been implemented.
That's right.
Okay. You've obviously signed this at the bottom. Now, what's the reaction that you get either from your peers or from your chain of command when you give them this document?
Well, at first, I think they were in shock that I had actually even stood up to begin with.
Oh, I'm sure they were. At
the time, I could see the look on their faces, but I already had that, like I said, that first page and handing out, calling the timeout. There was some pushback from a senior master sergeant who's no longer with our unit. However, at the time, there was pushback stating, this is what we're going to do regardless because we're mandated for it. That was the excuse. And my reasoning for what I did was this. So to combat it, now nobody else in the DFAC, that's where we eat, that's what we call it, or the chow hall. Nobody else said a thing after that. So now at the time, the adrenaline's like running through my body like lightning. You know what I mean? Because I felt that I did the right thing. I know that I did the right thing now, but at the time, when you stand up and you look around and you're the only person that's there, I don't know at the time if I questioned myself because I was already setting myself up to do it. But I think that I kind of saw where I stood at. You know what I mean? That everyone has to make their own decisions and everyone has a choice and consequences for those decisions that they make. I stood firm on those decisions that I make, and I still do to this day. After this was done, there's a scenario that kind of tells the story, and I'm going to show the picture of it coming up because it plays a very big role for me spiritually and my morals as a human being. And that was, as soon as I was done, I had to go outside and sit down. And there was a time where my father had passed away and my mother had moved in with us. And my wife was over at my parents' house getting the business documents taken care of. And they went to move these documents that were there. And a picture of my father had fell out from the documents. Those documents were going to be burned. And the picture of my father came out, and it fell out in his fatigues. And basically my wife, not knowing what I had no idea what I was doing. She basically sent me a picture of my father, which I put up here. And that, to me, like, the hair on my arm stood up and everything. And I was just, I mean, I got really emotional and everything, because it was like as if my father was telling me through that picture, good man, you did what was supposed to be done. You know what I'm saying? So that helped me out a lot on a spiritual level in my beliefs. It was crazy at the time. And then we were given options to basically submit a religious accommodation, because I believe in God and my religious beliefs. And he's tremendously helped me through everything with this too. I submitted that with my documentation. And then we went through the medical part of it. And at that time, they were really pushing hard against me and putting up any roadblock they could possibly do. So then we weren't allowed to leave the base until you either got the shot or you submitted your religious accommodation. Now, I was already typing it up, and I couldn't leave the base, and my laptop was at home. And thank God my oldest son is in the Air National Guard. And I called him up. I said, can you bring me my laptop? It's almost done. And he brought it out to the base because I couldn't leave, right? And I ended up finishing out my religious accommodation in the chapel on the pew in there. So I finished it up, submitted it to the chaplain, and then I had to go down to medical, and they had to do their spiel, basically, of, if you don't get it, you could potentially die and all this other gibberish. And at that point, I had left, and mind you, this is like 5, 6 o'clock now after drill on a Sunday.
This is still the weekend of September 11th, September.
Yep, this is still the weekend. So I'm leaving the base, and there's 50 to 60 American citizens outside the base with signs and American flags, and the biggest American flag I've ever seen hanging over the overpass right by our base. And other military members were leaving for the day and just kind of like went around them and everything, you know what I mean? And I pulled over, and I got out of my truck, and I went over and started talking to them. And they had signs of "do not vax our troops" and things like that. And this is going on during this time right outside of our base. And this is what I mean by this was spiritual for me, because as these roadblocks were happening, I was able to overcome them and then see the reason why I'm overcoming these roadblocks is being presented to me right before me. You know what I mean? And it was wild at the time, but when I left, I felt, I guess you could say, Holy Spirit type scenario in my body. My arm hair would come up, you know what I mean? I just felt really spiritual about a lot of things. And I went home, and it was Monday morning, and I got up and I was trying to pour my coffee, and my wife was in the kitchen, and I couldn't pour my coffee, and I was shaking, and I friggin' lost it, because I witnessed my military brothers and sisters being held against their will, knowing that this, I don't even want to call it a vaccine. I'm going to call it what I believe it is, and what we know to this day what it is. It's a bioweapon. My military members were forced against their will to take this, knowing it's going to hurt them. You know what I mean? It just imagine, it's like and I knew that we were like in a wartime scenario. No matter how you cut it, in my mind, we're at war. And I said to my wife, I said, you haven't seen what I saw. And I was basically on my knees crying. Like, I lost it for about 15, 20 minutes because I couldn't stop it. You know what I mean? And I was in this position where I felt that I would, at least as an NCO, be able to, given that opportunity, to sit down and just lay out, look, this is what's going on. Can't we just take a look at it before we do this? You know what I mean? And I wasn't given that opportunity. So, here we are.
So, this whole, and as we continue the rest of the fallout of your story, it's a little bit of a process that happens, but
Yep.
For you, the moment in which you really made the decision to stand up was on that day at that commander's call. Is that kind of the moment if this were a movie, that's kind of the climactic moment when you make your stand? Was that it?
Yep.
Okay.
Because if you really think, and I know that you mentioned movie, and I want to touch on this. So we've all seen A Few Good Men, right? We've seen that movie. And the reason why I want to point this out is because I think you know what part I'm going to go to. At the end, the 2 Marines were still court-martialed no matter what the outcome was because of the order that they were given. And the reason why is because they didn't stand up for the Marine that they gave a code red to. Instead of standing up and doing the right thing, following their oath, right, they went ahead and did the order that they were given, even though they knew it was wrong. And they were court-martialed and dishonorably discharged for that. So that's, that plays a big role in this too.
So when you did you say you guys were in the dining facility where this wing commander was taking place?
Yep.
When you stand up and you're kind of, you're saying, hey, we need a timeout here. And you're the only one standing up. You kind of look to your, as I've said before, you look to your left and your right. You don't really have anybody standing there with you, and you realize, oh man, I'm alone now. I am alone. I'm the only one here, trying to figure this out. So you submit this document, the one that has all the links, some of the treatment protocols that you had found, and then your explanation as to why you believe that we need to take a timeout, etc. And then we saw the other document that you showed us, that you signed under duress, right? Correct. So this is about the same time period, or are those 2 documents about the same time period?
They're the same time period, roughly. Yes. The next step is basically submitting the religious accommodations.
Okay.
So when submitted, I'm still attending drill as I normally would. So every month I would attend drill, and the next phase would come in.
Right.
You know what I mean? So November we submit accommodations.
Yeah. So my question is when you sign up,
and then during that time frame, they could either approve them or them.
Yeah, I think we're
yeah, it's cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. That's okay.
No, I got you back.
Okay, we'll see if it fixes. So with these documents that are being submitted, and then you're going to move on and you're going to submit a religious accommodation request. But you mentioned that when you signed the one document and you put under duress and you referenced UCC 1308, and then this document that has the links and requesting the timeout, etc. So what is the reaction from your chain of command when you are submitting documents, either the one where you signed under duress or the other document where you give the links of the information found and you call for a timeout? What's the reaction from your chain of command?
Pushback, basically. I think that they knew that, okay, I was the one that was standing out and they had to come at me to basically take me out of the equation because they were still going to continue going on and doing what they were going to do or mandated to do, whatever. So it came down a lot harder after that. So as I progressed through it, the first religious accommodation that everybody submits, including mine, was denied. So everyone's religious beliefs were denied, which is kind of crazy because my whole time in the military, they basically encouraged going to church. And whatever denomination you were, they had on every base has a chapel. And on every base has a denomination and a time for service. So they're denying people's religious beliefs, yet they're having church services on military installations. So and that's another thing that, made me think, why are they denying people's religious beliefs, yet you have chaplains and you have religious services on every military installation of all denominations? That doesn't make any sense to me. So at that point, once it's denied, you can appeal. So I submitted my appeal. And at that point, we're looking roughly December, and I'm still going to drill. And I run into, I'm actually transitioned from the defect over to our main headquarters. I'm just walking. I had a couple meetings with the wing commander with my chain of command. So it was my master sergeant, it was my supervisor, and my chief. And I had multiple conversations with the wing commander at the time. who was Colonel Robinson. He's no longer there. But I want to make that a point because I was in transit going, and typically he was coming the other way, and he went to fist bump me. He saw me, I saluted him, and he went to fist bump me. And I don't do that because they were saying, oh, not to shake hands and everything. You know what I mean? At that point in time, the fist bump and, not shaking hands. And as a man, I'm like, no, we're going to shake hands. So I shook his hand, and he pulled me in, and he whispered, he says, keep doing what you're doing. And then let go and continued on. And at that point, like I said, there's different things that were happening as I'm going through this that were just crazy to me. Why would you do that? Number one. And number two, at that time, it was just another reason for me to continue fighting. You know what I mean?
Let's make sure we understand the significance, because like I'm starting to get angry as I just even hear this story. Now you've when we spoke on the phone, you told me about this before, but okay. So this is a full colonel, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so a full colonel, and what's his position?
He's the wing commander.
All right, he's the wing commander.
Correct.
Okay, so the wing commander, a full colonel, he sees you guys are walking. He knows who you are. He knows the resistance you've been giving against the mandate. You said this is in December of 2021, right?
Correct.
Okay. So he goes
yes,
to fist bump you, but you stick out your hand to shake his hand, right? All right. So he shakes your hand.
That's correct.
And then what does he do? What does he say?
He pulls me in and he says, keep doing what you're doing. And so you get the understanding of this, I'm in shock because you have to understand, I've already talked to him roughly about 8 times already with my chain of command to try to stop what was going on. And I got nothing but resistance. So for him to do that to me at that point in time, like I said, it was just another reason for me that I knew to keep pushing, to keep going.
So when you're pushing back against your chain of command, to a large degree, you are pushing back against him. I mean, he's the wing commander.
Mm-hmm.
So you two are on opposite sides of this issue. But he, you guys shake hands. He pulls you in, and then he says to you, keep doing what you're doing. So he's encouraging you to continue in the fight and keep pushing against this mandate.
Mm-hmm.
He himself is pushing on everybody in his command.
That's right.
Almost as if he's admitting to you that he knows what he's doing is wrong. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but he's encouraging you to continue the fight
mm-hmm.
against him. And to me, what's his name? Colonel Robinson?
Correct.
So Colonel Robinson is a complete coward. Okay, now these are my words. I'm not attributing these words to you, but Brad Miller here says Colonel Robinson is a complete coward. Colonel Robinson is indicative of the problems that we have at all levels of our command. Colonel Robinson, I don't know if he's still in command, but if he is, he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be in the uniform. He should take the uniform off. He's a fucking disgrace. Excuse my language, but he's a fucking disgrace to the uniform. And I mean, the fact that he's a commander and the fact that he's encouraging you to stand up and fight a battle against him that he is too cowardly to engage in himself. So we have an 06, a colonel, encouraging an E6 to do what the 06 is too much of a coward to do. He should take the uniform off because he's a disgrace. Let me just stop right there because I'm gonna get like riled up. But that Colonel Robinson is emblematic of the reason that our military is completely in shreds. It's in complete tatters because of cowards like Colonel Robinson. I mean, on the one hand, it's maybe I can give him a shred of credit where he kind of embraces you and he says, hey, keep doing what you're doing and keep, stay in the fight. But that means that he knows that you're on the right side of this and he's on the wrong side of this. And it's the same thing as these cowards who say, you can fight, but I can't. I can't fight because I'm an 06. Then don't be an 06. Don't be a colonel. If you can't If you can't stand up when our military is facing the most significant fight that has occurred during that colonel's career, then you shouldn't be a colonel. You shouldn't be wearing the uniform at all. So anyway, again, those are my words, not your words. But I remember when you and I were speaking on the phone and you first told me that. I mean, I like nearly lost my mind, because I mean, that is just, it doesn't surprise me, but it just pisses me off. Now, again, and I want everybody to understand very clearly, I'm the one calling him a coward. I'm not saying that Scott is calling Colonel Robinson a coward. But I think he's a complete coward. I completely think he's a coward. Okay, so that's your wing commander. So this is your wing commander who is too afraid to do the right thing himself, but encourages you to do the right thing.
Yep. I think that they knew that. I don't know for a fact. I could just, and this is assumptions, but in my mind, while I was going through this, and I got to say it, they knew that I wasn't going to quit. I already told him I wasn't giving up. Because like I said to you, we've had like multiple meetings prior to that. And I told them I'm not laying down. So here we go to January of 2022 drill, and I'm given an LOR, which is a letter of reprimand. So the LOR basically states that I didn't follow any of the orders, even though the appeal for my religious accommodation was also denied. Right. So here I am in front of the colonel again, and the command chief, who sat across from me. So they called me up.
Yeah. So you're being
into his office.
You're being formally reprimanded for not following the unlawful orders. Okay. Yep. Got it.
Yep, that's correct. So I was brought up by the senior master sergeant, who's no longer there. He did some bad stuff and got put away for it. So he had told me I got to go up there and not to bring my briefcase with me. Typically, I bring my briefcase with me because I had all my documents in it. So just in case if they asked me anything, I could go in there and pull it out and show it to them. But Colonel Robinson already knew where I stood. So I went to his office, and the command chief sat across from me. And Colonel Robinson sat to the left of me. And then the senior master sergeant, I'll say his last name, Feltz, he sat about 5 chairs down the table from me. So I bring my briefcase in and everything, just because this is my documents, and just in case I need them, I'm going to have them. I don't care what he said. So Colonel Robinson basically begins to go through and says, hey, I haven't done an LOR in a long time, but let me read it to you. And I said, sir, you don't have to read it because I'm not going to sign it. I didn't do anything wrong. My religious beliefs have been denied. I appealed, they denied them again, or the upper command denied them again. And now I'm being punished for no reason whatsoever because I'm not following an unlawful order. So he still continues to read it to me.
And you just state the order was unlawful. So you were
unlawful. The order was unlawful.
Yep. Okay. All right. So you send this, you say, hey, I'm not going to sign this anyway.
That's right. So he continues to still read it to me. So I just basically stare past the command chief and look at the wall. I'm listening, but it's going in like one ear and out the other because I already have my mindset. I'm not signing it. So he's done and everything, and he spins it over to me. And he goes, now, if you'd sign down here. And I said, sir, I respectfully decline. I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm not going to sign this document. And I spun it back to him. And he goes, and just makes his face. You can see him starting to get mad and everything. And I said, but I would like to have a copy of that document, if I could, please, from my records. And he says, well, if you're not signing it, you're not getting a copy. And I said, well, I'm not signing it, so I guess I'm not getting a copy. And I asked to be respectfully requested to be dismissed. So they dismissed me, and I go away for about, go back to cooking for about 2 hours. We're putting out, meals and stuff. And my chief comes up to me like 2 hours later. He goes, what the F did you do? What did you do? I'm getting yelled at from, the FSS commander. I'm getting yelled at by the wing commander. I said, I didn't do nothing. I just respectfully declined to sign an LOR that I didn't do anything wrong for. I said, I asked for a copy and he didn't give me a copy. So
yeah, which he's
about 30 minutes later, he comes back down and he hands me a copy. I said, oh, I thought I'm not supposed to get a copy. So basically JAG had told the wing commander he still has to have a copy. So what they did was they just put member refused to sign.
Yep.
And they sign it, and then they gave it to me. So
yeah, the fact that he would, and I'm sure he just did it in a moment of frustration because you were, you refused to sign, which you can do. Like you can do.
You can.
And that's what they're going to do. They're going to put on their member refused to sign. No problem.
Yeah.
But again, you know, when he refuses to give you a copy, it's like, well, he's still going to put it in your file, regardless of whether or not you sign. It's still going to be filed, you know, so it still goes into effect. So it's like, why wouldn't he give you a copy? I mean, the letter of reprimand still stands, regardless of whether or not you sign it. So, yeah, it sounds like Jag got to tell the commander, like, hey, sir, what do you can't ask for a copy, just a copy.
It was crazy. And like I said, mind you, I'm still attending drills during this time. I'm still getting paid in points towards retirement. I'm in my 19th year now. You know what I mean? I'm like, and it's nuts. So I go through February.
Oh, Colonel Robinson. But anyway, okay.
So I go through February. March comes up. Well, February comes up and they say to me, you're attending drill, but you're not allowed to come in for March. You're on no pay, no points. In my mind, it was their last ditch effort to try to coerce me to get the vaccine or bioweapon, or I was going to be placed into the IRR. So they had basically a plan of how things go. So if you denied it, they already knew what they were doing. This was already planned out. They had it wrote down on the whiteboards and everything in the offices. So they already had everything planned out of if people were going to refuse and stuff like that. Okay, here's the next step. You're going to the IRR. So anyways, so I attend February's drill. I'm told no pay, no points for March drill. So I don't come in. I follow the order. Okay, you don't want me in. I won't come in. But they bring me back in April on pay and points. So the wing commander is on vacation. I'm actually supposed to go into the IRR in April, but she's on vacation. So the major basically just shows me the paperwork and here we go again. You know what I mean? No, sir, I'm not signing anything. And I said to him, did you see my appeal? Did you see the reason for my appeals? And I'm in the colonel's office of FSS, Laban. And she pulls out the red folder that I put everything in. It's a red folder, put all the information in there. She goes, I have it, but I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. But you want me to sign a document that you didn't even read my appeal to? So I refused to sign those. And then they stated, okay, May is your last drill. You're going to be placed into the IRR. So I come in for May.
Explain to us real quick what the IRR is.
I can show you the document. I can pull it up and show it to you. That way I can explain it a little bit better. So without sharing.
In the timeline, now May of 2022, right?
Yeah, we're at May of 2022. Here's the document. Shows it right there, May of 2022. So it basically states about participation status. So I'm not allowed to participate in drill any longer because I refuse the vaccine mandates. And what they're going to do is I'm not, and I don't know how it is in any of the other branches or anything like that, but I know for a fact that as far as my story goes, that I was never discharged honorably or other than honorable. So I was never given a DD-214 at all that stating that I was discharged. I was given this document stating that I was placed into the IRR. So basically, my contract was done at that point in time, and I was no longer being paid or any points towards my retirement. And again, this was my last year. So here's the document showing that. And you can see it's Air Force Command and their spiel and everything like that. So after May, I basically do not attend any drills whatsoever.
So your commander here, Lieutenant Colonel Campo, so she says with this document, what she is doing is she is placing you in a non-participation status. So you are being moved from the Air Force Reserve to the IRR, which is the inactive ready reserve, right?
Correct.
And that by moving you into the inactive ready reserve, you're not supposed to go to drill then because you're not receiving any of your monthly pay, right. But you're also not accruing any points towards your eventual retirement status.
That's correct.
But at the same time, they don't discharge you.
That's right.
You get no discharge paperwork.
Yep. But
your pay is stopped, and for all intents and purposes, the clock has stopped. Like your clock for your service time moving towards retirement, that is stopped.
That is stopped.
Okay. Yep. So now you told me before about your your ID card, so your CAC. So what'd you have to do with your CAC?
So basically, I still have my CAC card up until the point when just before the CAC was going to expire. So I still had it all the way until December of 2022. It was still active because that's when I was supposed to retire. I was on my retirement year, so to speak. So that's when it was supposed to be done. I wouldn't be able to basically come on. So the other ID that I got, this is after December to stay relevant. So mind you, from this time frame, from May all the way till December, I'm still attending drill. So what I mean by that, I still go in, but I go in my civilians on Saturday just to have breakfast in the morning and stay relevant to my airmen and let them know that even though I'm not here, I'm still fighting on the back end.
Yeah. Okay. So you're there unofficially.
Right.
You're not getting paid for being there.
Not getting paid. And I'm only there, I only stay there for like 2 hours.
Right.
Just to hang out, and then I go about my day.
Right. But you are permitted. You're obviously you have to get on the base. So you're allowed to get on the base.
Yep.
No one kicks you out when you show up.
No.
But you're there in your civilian clothes.
Correct.
And you're not receiving any pay for being there, and you are you're not formally participating in any of the training.
Right.
Right. Okay. All right. Yep. Got it. So you're there kind of, unofficially. Okay. Got it.
So I just want to backtrack. I think I missed something here. So I want to backtrack on something. So pull up, which it probably isn't going to. Dang. Here we go. No. There's a letter that I have for Senator Mastriano. So as I'm going through the fight and everything like that, what happens is that I'm trying to get congressional support to help fight what I'm going through. I guess it's not letting me pull it up for some reason, probably because here it goes, because I already had it pulled up. Technology for you. So anyway, so as I'm fighting and everything, I'm on the back end going through all this. I'm going through congressional. I'm contacting everybody I can think of, as far as from my mayor all the way up. So I get I get in touch with Senator Mastriano, who's the state senator for the state of Pennsylvania. And basically I let him know what I've been going through, and also contact my rep, Congressman Guy Reschenthaler, who's in the Washington district where I live at in Western Pennsylvania. But Senator Mastriano was the only one that actually, and he's a colonel in the Army, former colonel in the Army, now senator, and he's the only one that listened to me. He's the only person that took the time to listen, even when he was campaigning. I sent emails, letters, phone calls like crazy. And I wasn't getting in touch with them the way that I felt that I should. So I found out where he was going to be at campaigning wise when he was campaigning to be governor of Pennsylvania. And I actually went and met him face to face, and I'll show you a couple pictures and everything. But I wanted to show you this letter because I feel it's significant, because it basically goes into this medical plan discussion or symposium that they had, and you could see what doctors were there. So there's Senator Mastriano, they have the entire discussion and all the links. Peter McDougal, who we know now that's been coming out and stating what the adverse reactions were, Attorney Thomas Renz, just a host of other doctors as well. And these links basically, when you click on them, show you everything that the whole discussion, what's going on with these vaccines or bioweapons.
And in terms of a timeline, so you sent this email in April of 2022. So this is right about the time that you were being moved into the IRR.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. So yeah,
I think that I felt at that point in time, I felt that I knew I was going to be getting placed in the IRR. So what can I do and find a way to gain support so I wouldn't have to get into the IRR and I can just finish out my military career? Now, mind you, I only had like 8 months left until I retired.
Yeah, sure.
Here I am on the back end trying to fight this, and I'll just exit out of it. And then I brought up some pictures just to show you. So this is me meeting with Senator Mastriano and Kathleen Barnett. And like I said, during this time, they're running, for office at the time. So I'm getting in front of him face to face. He actually sits down with me. I talk to him, and we have a discussion about everything. And then I also met with Teddy Daniels as well, who was running for lieutenant governor, who's former military. He's an infantryman. He has a Purple Heart there. He was wounded in combat. So, like I said, I'm getting in front of these people and trying to gain up support to help out, you know what I mean? And let them know, hey, this is what's going on in this base. I submitted all the documentation. I've done everything correct all this way. And in my mind, I'm losing ground because I'm getting placed into the IRR. So I'm looking to see where I can get help and support from in this.
So when you just when you meet with Doug Mastriano, when you meet with Teddy Daniels, how are you received? I mean, when you're talking to them, do you feel like they are aware of what's going on? Are they supportive? But also, do you feel like you're informing them of something that they were unaware of previously? Does it seem almost like they're shocked at what they're hearing from you?
No, I think that they were combating it and knew about it at the time as well, because when I was talking to them about it, like you see them there with the pictures and everything, shaking hands and everything. They knew what I was doing, and they were actually encouraging me to continue and not give up and not quit. They were there to support me and whatever I needed.
Right.
So they were a blessing to me. And like I said, this is part of that spiritual battle, because on my end of things, this is how I think sometimes. If something's put in front of me and said, you can't get past this, I'm going to try to find a way around it. I'm going to try to find a loophole. I'm going to try to find a way that I can combat it or overcome it, so to speak. And also because of my religious beliefs.
Right.
So fast forward into the second time that I meet with them. And I'll pull up a picture, and this was in Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania. The second time I meet with him, I also get to meet Wendy Bell, who is a radio talk show. She's actually was with KDKA and was newscast here in Pittsburgh. And her show is basically nationwide. And I meet with them and Jenna Ellis and Senator Mastriano again. And at this point, they listen to my story again. And Wendy gives me her number, and I give her mine and everything, my contact information. And she asked me, she says, would you like to be on my show? Now, this is, mind you, this is the first time I've ever been on a radio show or podcast or anything. So I was a little bit nervous, but I knew I had to do something to get the word out and get my story out there. So I agreed to it. And it was roughly in June, I would say, that I had the radio program with her. And I'll pull up the quick link for it. So this is basically when it was end of June, right beginning of July. On my social media page, I posted thanking her and everything for the opportunity, and also stating that there are other military members that are fighting this. I am not the only one. That
Right.
They thought that they would make me believe that I was standing alone and that there was nobody else. But as I'm going through this process, I'm seeing other military members, such as yourself, and friends of mine that I know now, that are standing up and fighting their own way and for their own reasons and for their own beliefs as well. So you got to understand, as time is progressing, I'm gaining momentum. Was I down in the dumps sometimes and not feeling like I was making ground or fighting back hard enough? Yes. But I was able, and again, this is why I believe it's spiritual for me. I was able to meet people and able to get contacts and keep pushing forward and not giving up, and keep having these opportunities given to me, which I'm very grateful for. Also with the church that I attend, which is Revival Brigade or Revival Today, but there's also a Veterans Brigade that's really big component of that church. And they basically, there's a lot of military veterans that are associated with them, with the church. Let me get that pulled up. That are associated with the church and everything. And I was given an opportunity, not only do I attend the church, but I also serve in security and usher detail for the church as well. But Jeff is a former Army combat veteran as well, and he does the podcast for our church. So I was able to, through friends of mine that were at the 171st that I still know and talk to today, Matt Antis and Laura Antis are very good friends of mine, brought me to the church, and I was able to be a part of the Veterans Brigade during this time frame. So I'm not in the military, but I'm part of this. And Jeff gives me the opportunity to do a podcast with the church and get my story out as well. So they put that out there for me, and I can show you another couple pictures here. And this basically goes into me doing the podcast with Jeff and then laying out all the paperwork. This is right here, down here, are all the documents that I had at the time. I have a ton more now, but at the time I was able to present them and show him this is what was happening as I was pushing through this in a spiritual manner. Where are we at now? So I go through that whole part of the component, and we're all the way till January of 2023, where the mandate, because it's actually December of 2022, going into January 2023, where the NDAA came in and the vaccine mandates were nullified, were done with. So now, about half a month later, in mid-January, they're allowing military members that were kicked out
I think we
and families were destroyed. You have to understand the magnitude of this, and I don't think the American branches of service. It went away for a little bit. It's back.
Yeah, I think it froze.
I don't think that they know the magnitude of how it was for all branches. So the component of it all is military members were thrown off the bases because they did not go along with the mandates. They stood firm, but yet they're being punished. And life insurance, their medical insurance is gone, their pay is gone, their home is gone. I mean, you have to understand the magnitude of this, and this is across the country and even overseas on military bases, because now military members are stranded overseas and not allowed to come back home until they get a vaccine that they don't want. So here we go with the coercion again. So this element is it's just, they're bringing us back. And I knew that this is just from my standpoint. And I want to make sure that I make this clear. This is me. I didn't want to give up because I wanted to finish out and retire, but I didn't also want to give up because I made a promise to my airmen. And I also took an oath to my country to not give up on anything, whatever my beliefs are.
Okay, you might be back now. You were breaking up there for a second, but yeah. So well, we heard. I know this is important, so I want to make sure we get this from you. So you mentioned that you wanted to finish your service. That was important to you, and a large reason,
right.
Large part of the reason why it was important to you was because of the relationship that you had with your airmen and the duty that you felt that you had with your airmen. So okay, so yeah, I just want to make sure that we hear that. We're breaking up a little bit, but I think we're back now. So okay.
Plus, it's my oath. I took an oath to the country to defend the country and American citizens against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
So then, okay, so you mentioned the National Defense Authorization Act. You mentioned how because of that the mandate was repealed. You started to have some service members who were actually invited back on. So now take us through kind of the beginning towards the middle of 2023 and what that meant for you.
Well, for me, I wanted to go back, like I stated, for those reasons. So I submitted my paperwork back into recruiting to come back in. And that's a lengthy process, as we all know. So, but for the most part, they didn't even know how to bring me back in, because I was the first one to come back out of the IRR back into service again. So it was a lengthy process, and we go through February with no results of anything. Up, you had to get a body fat measurement, which I blew out of the water. I'm still in great shape. I'm physically fit to serve. And then after I passed that, then they came up with a medical physical fitness test where, as far as, making sure I was healthy. I passed that. And then they bring up the next component, which is crazy. It's everything. And at the time, the medical nurse practitioner states, you have to get a flu shot. And I'm like, well, we don't get flu shots until October, November timeframe during flu season. So on social media, there were components that I saw that they were incorporating. Pfizer, Moderna were incorporating the flu vaccine with the COVID vaccine. This is after the fact that I told them I'm not getting that either. And I would have to submit another religious accommodation for this. So here we are, fast forward. And I was supposed to be back in March to finish out, and here we go again. So it's delayed all the way through August. So I submit my religious accommodation, and that gets approved. And then I also have a waiver for the vaccines, and I check all of the vaccines to be waived from due to my religious accommodation and my religious beliefs. And that gets approved. So here we are, August, and then September.
Now, with these religious accommodation requests, so now you have a waiver that that permits you to not take the flu shot or any of the shots.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct. So I have that done, and that's approved, and my religious accommodation is approved. Was September 9th and 10th. And I attended my first drill, and I'll show you a picture of that. I was brought back in, I was gained, so to speak, and then there's a picture of me and my airmen. There's just two of them, of all of them. There's a lot more, of course, a couple of them that are with me. And that's my first drill back, 9th and 10th. Everything. I was excited, but then when I actually got there and put the uniform on and everything, when I got up in the morning and put my uniform on, I was like, yeah, you know what I mean? This is where I'm at now. And it was good to be back. And like I said, I got in there. We had a nice discussion with my command and both my chiefs and my first shirt, and laid out a plan for me to attend drills and get caught up and retire honorably. So it's a positive thing. You know what I mean? I just hope there's no speed bumps. I pray that there's no speed bumps in the road and I can get through this, and I'm sure I will. I actually have drill tomorrow and Tuesday because I'm not going to be able to attend in October's. So I'm making them up tomorrow and Tuesday. So I'll be there the next 2 days.
Okay. And when do you think you'll actually hit 20 years and be able to complete your service?
Well, it should be this December 30th. And if not, because of anything that's going on as far as federal funding and things like that, and the money situation, I may be able to extend a little bit just to get the time in. So I may have to extend until April. We'll have to see when we cross that bridge when we get there. But
yeah, okay.
But it's like I said, it's positive. It's a positive event for me as far as I'm concerned. At least I'm trying to just finish out honorably and retire.
So you're so you were placed into the IRR for over a year. So from May of 2022 until September of 2023.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So 16 months roughly.
Yep.
You lost pay, but you also lost your the accrual of time that could have counted towards your retirement.
Yeah, well, my wife and I both lost our health insurance as well. But the good thing is that my full-time job, I was able to get gained on there just in case for emergencies or anything. You know what I mean? But this is what I'm saying. Every time something happened, I was able to, her and I talked about it. It wasn't just me alone, but I was able to find another avenue and do that. We all know that the military insurances, before all this happened, was probably the best care you can get, right? So on a TRICARE level. So, but it's looking pretty good. So I want to also show a quick picture of a couple of gentlemen, if I may. I don't know if I'm skipping or not.
Yeah, you are skipping a bit, but
Can you hear me?
Go ahead and try and share the picture.
Or is it going off? I met on the left is Rob Pike, good friend of mine, and in the middle is Mark Basham. He's also a good friend of mine. I met them out in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I went out there and we had a nice symposium to American citizens about what our stories were, how each one of us went through the scenario of the COVID situation. And I met a couple of great people, as well as when I met you and talked to you on the phone, and now, we get to talk and everything too here. So this is just like what I'm talking about. It's meeting people, and knowing that you're not alone and able to fight through everything.
Tell us about the book that you're holding there.
Okay, so the book, let me pull up something real quick. Stop sharing here. All right, so the book that, which is really cool, a patriotic community. And the book is from Colonel Robert A. Greene, called "In the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines." And it's a book about all the military members that have just bad stuff. It's just horrible. I want to stay respectful, so I'm just going to say just bad stuff. But the cool thing about this, though, is that I kind of used it in a sense to explain to people out there how my airmen really felt and how people that I know really felt. So what I did was I asked them to sign. Not only that, I got this idea from Colonel Greene because he signed it and sent me the book, but I also want to show the feelings of how the airmen really felt during that time. And sometimes it's emotional for me, because when I see what they really went through, and again, that wasn't able to be stopped, but it just goes to show you, and this is just whatever the blank pages are, I just want to show it real quick. But they're basically thanking me, in a sense, for standing up for them. And this is the back part of the book. And this is the last one. Even my recruiter, both my recruiters signed here and here. So this is just like the magnitude of like what's happened in the military. It just, it's amazing that it was ever allowed to even happen, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's incredible. So first of all, that book by Commander Robert A. Greene, Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines, is it's a fantastic book. I've reviewed it before. I've mentioned it multiple times. Commander Greene's just tells a tremendous story. And that book, even though he wrote it, he has used that book to kind of explain the story of many more people than just himself. It really is a story of all of the individuals who were persecuted. I'm just going to say it. Were persecuted for doing the right thing, or persecuted for their faith, or persecuted for maintaining their oath to the Constitution when the vast majority of the military did not. So, okay, so there's another picture with you holding the book. Yeah, who are you with right here in this photo?
This is Jeff. He's the gentleman at my church, at Revival Today church, that with the Revival Brigade, with the Veterans Brigade, that gave me the opportunity of the podcast. He's part of the security detail there.
Cool.
Yeah, good friend of mine.
Good. All right, good deal.
So the last thing that I just want to leave everybody with is the other reason why I did what I did. I believe in this country so much. And I believe in the other military veterans that are standing up and fighting. And I'm telling you now, do not lay. The thing that resonates with me a lot is when I think of America and our freedoms and everything, all veteran cemeteries across the country. And every month I go visit my father at the veteran cemetery here in Pittsburgh at the Alleghenies. And I look at the vast headstones, and I'm thankful for the freedoms that I have and had and will continue to have. And I also am reminded that they never laid down and they fought for our freedoms. You're not laying down. Nobody else over there that's fighting is laying down, and neither am I. And I think the American people need to stand up with their military and fight back for their constitutional rights and their freedoms. And that's my personal opinion from this whole experience. And if you have a religious belief, then that's very important as well.
You know, I certainly want to commend you for the stand that you took. I mean, I can only imagine what you felt when you stood up in that dining facility in September of 2021 against your chain of command and realized that you were the only one standing up, you know, and that was the moment. I would say, you know, you've been in the military, even though you've had breaks in service. I mean, you put on the uniform 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, you know, it's this fight that has defined your military career, and that you have demonstrated your courage in a way that very, very few people did. You know, you told us a story about your colonel who wanted you to fight a battle that he was too cowardly to fight. Tell me, just kind of as we sum up here and we end, what about any of your other commanders? You know, so you told us about the colonel, but when you were submitting these documents or engaging in leadership with your other commanders, what did they tell you?
Well, when I did stand up that one time, I was told not to bring emotion into it. But from my standpoint, as you read in that letter to them, that document on the 11th, it is emotional because my airmen are being hurt. And it is painful because they're not only being hurt physically, but on a mental level, as I stated. But I don't understand how you can't bring emotion into it when you're supposed to look after your airmen, when you're supposed to look and do the right thing as an NCO. How can you leave that out?
So when you submitted a document saying we need to make a timeout, and we have individuals who are being physically hurt, mentally hurt, we have families that are being affected, you were told by one of your commanders to not bring emotion into the situation.
Correct. Meaning follow the lawful, at the time that they thought was a lawful order, follow the order and keep your mouth shut.
Right. Okay. And I mean, will you tell us who this commander was?
Yeah, it was the one who signed the IRR document.
Okay. Okay. So again, we got another coward here. So we got another coward who we have a military full of commanders who are breaking the law, who are in full violation of their oath to the Constitution. And where I might be able to extend a little bit of credit is maybe this individual, this lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, who's received a lot of education on the government's dime. Maybe this individual lacked the strategic thinking ability to understand what exactly was going on, and that this was a threat to freedom. Maybe she didn't understand that. But 2 years later, with all the information that has come out, has she come back and apologized to you for making such a ridiculous statement to not, with emotion?
No, sir. No. None of the officers apologize whatsoever.
Yeah, complete coward.
Now, as far as
full violation of their oath, do not understand the threats that this country is under, and rather than standing up and doing the right thing and standing up against those threats, they have decided to side with those threats against the Constitution, against our military, and against freedom-loving Americans. These people are cowards. They are an absolute disgrace. I can't believe these people are officers in the military. Further, I cannot believe that they are in positions of command. Whoever put them in command should be ashamed of themselves. They should be ashamed of themselves. And if they had any sense of duty whatsoever, one, they would resign from their position of command. They would resign from their commission, and they would leave the military in disgrace. That's not going to happen because they're too cowardly to do that. But if they had any sense of understanding of what they have done over the last couple of years, if they had any sense of duty whatsoever, which they don't, but if they did, they would leave in disgrace, trying to preserve any shred of dignity that they still have. They don't have that dignity, so they won't. But if they did, they would resign. The military would be far better if people like that lieutenant colonel and that colonel were to leave. Unfortunately, there are too many other commanders exactly like them. That's why readiness is in the hole. That's why. But anyway, so yes, you got a lot of cowards. You got a lot of cowards that are in command in your unit. Again, those are my words, not Scott's words. Those are my words. Now, unfortunately, people like that colonel, people like that lieutenant colonel, that's not unique to your unit. Unfortunately, those people are all over every single branch of service, whether we're talking about the reserves, whether we're talking about the guard, whether we're talking about active duty. That lieutenant colonel and that colonel are very, very similar to the caliber of officer, which is extremely low, the caliber of officer and their lack of integrity that we have all across the force. But I will tell you what's unique. What's unique is the courage that you have demonstrated, Scott. That is what's unique. If we had more people out there that were like you, we would have been able to turn this thing around. And if we do end up turning this thing around, it will be because of you. Kind of the last question that I have for you is, you're clearly a man of faith. I appreciate that about you. You clearly have spiritually sustained yourself in this fight. You've got a terrific story when it comes to your family and the way that you receive support, from the family that you grew up in, the sense of patriotism that you have, your adherence to the faith. As you started to put forth your religious accommodation request, did you receive any religious support from your unit as you were doing that, from chaplains?
Well, the one chaplain I know in the beginning, the first set of religious accommodations, I think they were overwhelmed with a lot of things. And from my understanding, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they weren't signing off on all of them. It was going up to higher echelon to be either approved or disapproved. And we all know that nobody's was approved. So that means it wasn't signed by a competent chaplain. So the second time around, while I was visiting, I did speak with my chaplain that's on the base. And this was before I even came back. I was just attending like breakfast and hanging out with my airmen and everything. And he had said to me before he left, this was after he was getting breakfast, and he said to me, because of people like you, my son doesn't have to get the vaccine. And at first I was kind of in shock, and I still kind of am to this day, because my son serves, and I would never, ever, ever let that happen to my children whatsoever. I would be standing up and probably in rage, because that's what parents do for their children. If they're ever put in a position that they know they have to come in and protect their kids.
But what do you think the chaplain was saying when he said, because of people like you, my son, the chaplain's son, doesn't have to take the shot? Do you know if the chaplain's son is in the service?
I don't on a personal level. I think that maybe he was going to be getting into the military, and I think ran into that situation and maybe had held off until this blew over. That's just my speculation of it. I don't know for sure. Right. I just knew that what he had said to me left me in kind of a state of shock, as far as I can't believe that I was told someone said this to me, just as much as I couldn't believe Colonel Robinson pulling me in and saying, keep doing what you're doing, and then walking away.
So was this chaplain engaged in the fight against the shots at all?
I want to say I'm not sure, because I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. I only know what I was going through and talking with him. Now, did I have good conversations with him? Yes. Did I have some bad conversations with him? Yes. He felt that I would not be able to get all of the vaccines waived.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my religious beliefs and the church that I attend, I was also given a letter signed by my chaplain, or my pastor, I should say, to back up my religious beliefs, that I do attend church, that I do believe in God, and these are my religious beliefs, and these are my rights.
Right.
Constitution.
So this chaplain, and again, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but I am trying to figure out like what's going on, because unfortunately, I'm not a chaplain, but I have been extremely disappointed, just as I've been extremely disappointed in our commanders in the military and in our physicians in the military, our lawyers in the military. I mean, they all, 99% of them should resign, you know. But our chaplains, that's another group that I'm just extremely disappointed in, because these people who should have stood up, as a general rule, they did not. They were just as cowardly as everybody else. So I had no idea, you know, either did not have the spiritual foresight and discernment to see exactly what was going on, or were too cowardly to do anything about it. So again, I don't know this chaplain that you're referring to, but when I hear that statement as you relate it to me, part of me asks, was this chaplain crediting you for standing up to such a degree that it, you know, then protects the rights of his son? So he's crediting you for standing up in a way that helps his son when he himself did not. Now, I don't know the chaplain, so I don't know that if that is the exact case. Maybe this chaplain also stood up and fought against this. I don't know. But if he didn't, and he's crediting you, then in a way, what he is saying, and I don't know that this is the case, but if it is, then what he is saying is, thank you for being a better example to my son than I am. Thank you for being a better example of a Christian, of a service member who understands his constitutional rights, and as someone who understands the true threats to America. Thank you for being a better example of all of that than I, my son's father, am. And because I can't be a good example to my son has to look at other men in order to find good examples, because I'm not one. Thank you for being that good example for my son. Now, again, maybe I'm reaching, and maybe that doesn't exactly hold water in this specific case. But what I will tell you is, the vast majority of our officers in the military are awful. They have no courage. They have no integrity. They do not understand the Constitution they took an oath to. The vast majority of our military physicians have made decisions and recommendations to their commanders that have destroyed physical readiness. The vast majority of our lawyers don't know shit about the Constitution. The vast majority of our military lawyers don't know shit about the law. They should be ashamed of themselves. The vast majority of our chaplains I hold more scorn towards them than I do the others. And I'm like, you know, I'm kind of losing my cool here, but these people completely deserve it. I mean, they completely deserve it. You know, our country is teetering on the precipice because of people like these commanders, you know, that put on a costume every day. They put on a costume every day and pretend to be military officers. The same thing with these military physicians, these military lawyers, and the chaplains, you know. So maybe this doesn't exactly apply to this chaplain that you're referring to, but I will tell you that it does apply to a lot of the chaplains, you know, that pretend to be men of faith when they're not, you know. And I don't go around challenging other people's faith a lot. I'll challenge their conviction to the Constitution. I'll challenge their conviction to this country because they're wearing a military uniform, you know. But I'm not a chaplain, but I take a chaplain's role very seriously. So when I see, you know, 95% of our chaplains who proclaim to be something that they're not, I have a real problem with that. I have a real problem with that kind of deception. I have a real problem with that kind of duplicity, with people going around wearing a facade and passing themselves off to be something that they're not. And like I said just a few minutes ago, our country is in shambles because we have too few people wearing a uniform like you and too many people wearing a uniform that are like your commanders and maybe even potentially like this chaplain. So again, I'm not attributing any of that to you. I'm not saying that you are saying that towards these individuals, but I very much am. And if it doesn't exactly apply the way that I said towards this chaplain, then okay, but it absolutely applies to plenty of others, Anything else that you would like to share us with then, Scott, or share with us?
That's pretty much about it, really. That's the whole story in a nutshell. Like I said, I'm glad I'm back and I'm ready to retire honorably.
Well, you took a little bit of a different path than I did, and you reached out to me and you said, hey, here's my situation. I'm actually trying to retire. This is important to me. I want to talk to you about it. So, you reached out to me, so I want to credit you for that. We spoke on the phone, and then we decided to do this. And I thank you for your stand. I think your story is incredible. So I want to commend you for being a man of faith. I want to commend you for understanding what you're fighting for to a degree that very, very, very few people who are wearing the uniform seem to understand. I obviously I don't know your father, but even I feel emotion when you invoke your father's memory or you share the type of family that you grew up in, the way that you feel towards your father, the story where your mother shares this photo with you. At the moment when you're in this fight in which that photo is going to most resonate with you, I just think that's an incredible story. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the way that you have stood up for God, the way in which you put God first and foremost in your life, the way in which you understand your service as service to God and then also to your nation. And I think that that's the way people used to look at service to the nation. Too few people look at it that way anymore. So on behalf of myself and anybody who might be listening to this, and also the untold numbers of service members out there that have similar stories to you, and unfortunately just nobody's heard those stories, I want to thank you, because as you speak out and you put your voice out there, you're giving a voice to some of these individuals who have also been super, super, super courageous, and maybe nobody's, heard their stories. Because the truth is, you take your position as an NCO very, very seriously, and when a former lieutenant colonel like myself, when I speak, some people are going to listen, and I understand that, and that's good. But there are people out there who are very, very, very junior service members. They didn't have the, 19 years of service like you or like me. They may have only had 19 months of service. They may have only been 19 years old. And unfortunately, their stories maybe just don't necessarily catch all the attention, but that does not in any way mean that they're any less courageous than anybody else. And in some ways they may be more courageous, because for somebody to be a super junior soldier and to stand up, I believe in many ways that took far more courage than the path that I did. When I read Rob Greene's book, the story in there that I thought was the one that resonated most strongly with me was the story of Seaman Recruit Owen. This kid who, he can't even make it through recruit training without being hassled by his command, and he ends up only serving, I don't know, what was it, 39 days or whatever in service, and then they boot him because he won't get the vaccine.
Yep.
I look at this kid, Seaman Recruit Owen, who, oh, by the way, I spoke to on the phone. So I actually asked Commander Green if it were possible, if I could get into contact with him. Yep. And he put me into contact with him. So I spoke to him on the phone. But I think of a story about a tremendous young man like that. And then I look at these generals and admirals, some of whom have had, 39 years of service. And to me, they're a complete disgrace. They're a complete disgrace to the uniform. And I don't say that lightly. I've gotten riled up here today.
Yeah.
But
I was talking about though too that I think the American public doesn't understand. This is, you got to think, this is all 6 branches of the military from the rank of E1 all the way up. You know what I mean? Like the magnitude is huge. And there's what? How many people have stood up? I would say in my thing that was there, it was roughly what, 17K plus that stood up. You know what I mean? Like, and the American people don't know this because they've been silenced. But we're going to change that because we're going to get more people to get their voices heard and speak out so American can step up to the plate.
yeah, that's a fantastic point. So there are stories of courage out there that Americans need to hear. So Scott, you're a tremendous leader. So thanks so much. You know, we talked for a bit today, but this is a tremendous story. I am appreciative that you reached out to me, that I got to know you, that I got to hear your story, that I got to be a very, very small part of you sharing your story. And come back. Let's talk again in a couple of months and see where you're at. But let me just end on that note. You are a tremendous leader who saw something and said something, even when maybe, you look to your left and your right and you didn't see too many people standing next to you, but you still did the right thing because you knew what the right thing was to do and you had the courage to do it. So thanks for giving us a little bit of time today, but more than anything, thanks so much for the example that you put forth for your airmen, for your family, for your unit, and even the example that you showed people like your colonel and like this chaplain who clearly needed an example of leadership and saw it in you. So thanks so much for your time today and for everything that you've done.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Take care.